Welcome to the Parks, Arts, Education, and Equality Subcommittee. Today is January 25th, 2017. I'm calling this meeting to order, and I have several cards for a call to the public. Jerry Van Gass, welcome. Happy New Year, Jerry.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, Laura, and council members and Parks members. I brought a copy here of the DVD of this very subcommittee's May 27th, 2015 meeting, at which time the big discussion was regarding parks, the lack of rangers, that the rangers had been declining every year since 2008, which was the year that we re-upped the voters' Phoenix Parks and Preserve Initiative funding, which brings in roughly $30 million a year. And the commitment back then in 2015 was to get back to the level of rangers, which were 60 full-time rangers. Right now we're at 48. And I gave you a handout there. The 3PI fund, has $55 million in it. Two accounts, either account in the initiative allows rangers to be hired. We're wondering where these rangers are. We keep hearing, we need to close the trails when it gets to 110 to the hikers. We need to inform tourists more. And our proposition back then, this was the pin everybody wore, Prop A, more, better, and safer. Well, the more part was supposed to be the rangers. What's happened since 2008, we have twice as many hikers out there. We have twice as many hikers, users of the mountain park system, as the Grand Canyon has. It's huge. It's around 10 million. Better? That's not better, because we have less rangers for that many people. And safer? It's definitely not safer. Look at the number of rescues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. And then I have Tim Sarakowski.
Good morning, Tim Sarakowski. Just to follow up with Jerry and reiterate, we had the same discussion last year. Hire more rangers. Hire more rangers. What happened? We're now less than we were last year. I'm not sure what more we can do to emphasize this point that the parks are becoming unsafe with the number of people that are hiking, and you have no rangers going up and down the trail. When are we going to look at the situation and start thinking about people's safety? Come on, folks. This has been going on year after year after year. You now are on notice. And if someone gets hurt on the mountain and they start looking at the scenarios of what we're talking about here, they're going to say you had enough notice. And when you get sued because someone's up there and they're hurt, they're going to say it's gross negligence on your part because you've known about it for years and have done nothing. Second thing I'd like to talk about is, and Greta's going to talk about this more, is selling a parcel of property in Phoenix. What a joke. It really, you look at this humongous list of things they have to jump through in the hoops. I wouldn't want to buy a piece of property from you guys. I wouldn't want to wait 2 years to purchase a piece of property. I wouldn't want to sit back and waste all my time and energy doing a negotiation when consequently this process should be made easier. It's not. It's now at a point that government needs to start saying to themselves, how are we going to make this process easier for people to purchase property? And if we don't do something, we need to do it soon. Thank you.
So I know we're not supposed to respond to call to the public. I am asking now for the future agenda to have a report on the Rangers and items that were brought up to the committee. And then the second thing is we are looking at the selling at parcels in the process, so I can give you that update. Greta?
It's Sylvia now.
Councilwoman Pastor and Councilman Nowakowski, Happy New Year to you both. And I hope it's a good year for the city, a year of progress and improvement. I come to you this morning because I have in my hand a document adopted in April of 13, that's almost 4 years ago, called City of Phoenix Parks and Recreation Board Policy. What this is, it's how to sell parkland. And this is a document for how not to sell parkland. This is the most regressive, repressive, restrictive document on how to sell real estate I have ever seen or read in my life. This is positively mind-boggling stupid. Any potential buyer of parkland in this city will give you the middle finger and move on, because you have given the middle finger to this city. I want each one of you, and the 5 of you who are not here today, to read this from cover to cover, and don't read it when you're tired. It's a soporific. This needs to be redrafted and redrawn to enable sale of park property. I practiced the business for 29 years, and I have never seen anything so offensive to a potential buyer in my life. This is the way for you to take nothing, and it's totally inexcusable. All 5 of you on the council read this, including the inestimable mayor. Thank you.
So we can't comment on that. What I can say is that there is a process and it goes through the Parks Board. And so I will make the commitment to work with the Parks Board regarding this policy. I hope so too, Greta. Councilman Sal DeCiccio is on the line. Councilman?
Yes,
Okay, just checking. I have.
I'm here.
Okay. I have minutes of the meeting. I need approval or corrections for the meeting of November 30th, 2016.
I'd like to approve the minutes of November 30th, 2016. Is there a second?
Councilman,
Yes,
are you seconding the minutes?
I am.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, please say
Aye.
Aye.
aye. Aye. Motion has passed. The minutes of the meetings. Consent actions, we have items 2 through 4. The Arizona Commissions on the Arts, 2017-2018 Community Investment Level Grant. We also have permission for the Phoenix Public Library to apply for Library Services and Technology Act. And item 4 is Arizona Community Foundation grant application. Does anybody want to hear anything on the consent?
A motion to approve items 2 through 4.
Second.
Thank you. Items 2 through 4 have, say aye.
Aye.
They have passed unanimously. We are on items 5 through 6. This is for information only. And anybody want anything from 5 through 6, which is Head Start Monthly Report. Item 6 is Phoenix Public Library Energy Zones and Active Workstation Partnership with Fit Phoenix.
I got briefed already, thank you.
Okay, items 5 through 6 for information only. We are on item 7. Phoenix Public Library's plan to remodel the children's area at the Burton Bar Library. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Good morning. We're very pleased to be here this morning to tell you about an exciting project that we hope to accomplish at the Burton Bar Central Library, which is 22 years old now. So it's very timely that we be talking about upgrading and, of course, upgrading the children's area, which is one of the most important areas in the library. With me today is architect Will Bruder, the architect of the Burton Bar Central Library, and Kelly Bouchong, who is the executive director of the Phoenix Public Library Foundation. So since opening its doors in 1995, Burton Bar Central Library's children's area has been a destination space for customers from all over the valley, whether it be to check out a book, attend a story time, explore the children's garden, learn with parents in the first 5 years space, or get some homework done on our free computers. There is something for all of the thousands of children who visit the children's area every month. With the 25th anniversary of Burton Bar fast approaching, the library is planning a remodel and expansion of its children's area in order to ensure that it remains a destination space for generations to come. In an effort to ensure our children's place is current with best practices regarding brain development and how children learn, particularly with respect to the importance of children's play, our focus was to design an engaging and interactive environment inclusive of parents as well as their children. The three primary roles that we have identified for the Phoenix Central Library's children expansion are refresh and reshape the children's library to promote children's discovery of knowledge through books within an inviting and dynamic destination for children and parents, expand and update the library's existing first 5 years sensory and motor skill environment to enhance learning and play between child and parent, and to create a supportive environment for the realization and development of maker skills in very young children related to creativity, curiosity, and discovery. The entry to the children's area should inspire a sense of wonder and make a statement about our priorities. It will be attention-grabbing, colorful, and visible from the main level entry point to the Burton Bar Central Library. It will be welcoming and draw in families looking for a good experience. The entry sequence includes a large curated collection of must-read books by ages and stages, including the books that all children should read to be ready for kindergarten. While the library will continue to have a depth and breadth of collection for children of all ages, with this new service model will allow children's librarians to create a collection of the highest quality library materials on display so parents and families can find them easily. The first 5 years area is an imaginative play space for children 0 to 5. The area will include a special place for children ages 0 to 24 months for safe and meaningful play. A greatly expanded first 5 years space filled with dazzling new interactives that will spark children's imaginations while they learn. In the last dozen years, libraries have become interactive learning hubs by providing every family a chance to learn through play with integrated parent seating, pre-literacy activities, and library materials at every turn.
I have a question right there. So the area that I think of is the area where I want to call them benches, but they're not benches, they're cushions
Right?
that go around.
Right?
And in the middle, that's where 1st to 5-year-olds kind of play, and then they have the sensory on the wall, and there's okay. So that will be then
Greatly expanded.
it will be expanded.
Yes,
Okay.
greatly expanded with
to know.
many more interactives. The space actually will accommodate about 100 different interactive activities
Oh.
for children.
That's great. That's awesome. Thank you.
And all of those activities support brain development, they strengthen the parent interaction, and prepare young children for school. The informal storytime space you see in the middle here will allow library staff to conduct programming right out in the middle of the children's area. This space is a special spot within the collections where children and parents can experience the imagination and power of reading. The space can be used formally for a programmed storyteller or more spontaneously as a comfortable space for children and parents to read together. Other activities may include puppet shows, author presentations, and library orientations. The space will be expandable, so we'll be able to do an intimate group, but also expand for our very large summer reading programs, which draw hundreds of children. The nonfiction and homework space is intended to reveal the strengths of the library's collection by drawing children into the stacks through interactive exploration. By aligning the collection in an array along the exterior of the space, we can activate curiosity in several new ways by making the collections come to life through sound, by creating activity boxes to link to the collection, and by revealing unexplored library resources through a treasure hunt. The homework area provides a space for students to work alone or in groups. And then the mini makerspace, where young children can learn about and explore STEM concepts. Mini Maker is a bridge space to introduce the fundamental ideas that we teach in Mach 1 to children and families. It's an open platform with tables and chairs and can adapt to changing needs and the creativity of the community while providing some regular activity stations and kits that need little or no staffing for family participation. The mini makerspace would be available for all hours the library is open, while our Mach 1 makerspace on the 4th floor has limited hours. Finally, the story space, the story tower, and the garden space outside. This will add a sense of wonder to the library's many story times. The formal story tower will be a tall sculptural element with dramatic views of the sky to provide a memorable experience for children and parents alike. The expanded children's garden will add new interactive pieces where children can sing the ABC song on dancing stones and have other interactive activities that will promote play and learning outside. So now I'd like to let Will talk a little bit about the project and the input that we got from the community.
So it's been a journey of listening, as always. That's where the Central Library started and why it's been so well received. We had 28 citizen meetings, if you remember, 25 years ago, and that was the start of it. For about the last 8-9 months, we've been working on this project, and we've had several interactives with kids and with parents. We've had Saturday workshops. We've looked at a range of possibilities. We looked at the Valley for similar sort of activity spaces, whether it be at the Science Museum or over at the Mesa Children's Museum. We didn't want to replicate. We wanted to, in our own Phoenix Children's Museum, we wanted to create a set of unique opportunities. The input was really well taken. We've had workshops with them so they can see the results of it. And the design you see before you is, again, enabled by the flexibility that was originally conceived in the building. As some of you have probably noted, over time now, what used to be Microfiche has become a College Depot. What used to become where the magazines were familiarly kept has become the Hive, the co-worker space, and it continues. So the armature is there, the framework is there, and yet conceptually, these are big ideas, they're flexible, they're interchangeable, they should be able to be accomplished with great economy. And as we look at this new story cone on the right, it's sort of looking backwards to look forwards. One of the spaces that this current story room is very modest by the use of the building, and that was determined by everybody that is there. So along with this more central story interaction area that Rita mentioned in the building, this new story cone will be almost 5 stories high. It will be a place where we can have a full school bus of kids brought into the space, almost doubling the capacity of it. And it'll become a marquee as you come off the freeway or as you look at the space from the new enhanced Hans Park and the whole development. So it's playing with that whole idea of revitalization and making something very special as we drive by the library on that approach. So any other questions I'd be happy to answer, but we are in a position with the concepts defined and good estimating that's been done. We feel very comfortable with the numbers realized. They're It's a reasonable sized number, but we've covered all the dreams and desires that the public has asked for, and we look forward to the next steps in the project.
Councilman Nowakowski.
And here's
Okay.
the numbers. So the total project budget estimate at this point, $2.8 million.
You know, one of the prides of our library is that we're changing with the times and we're creating teen spaces, kid spaces, people that are thinking in the future. So my thing is there a strategic plan that we're looking 10 to 20 years at Burton Bar, and how are we going to be using so-called new technology? I mean, I have a 3-year-old kid that picks up an iPad, and it's just amazing to watch how he can log in and go through apps and all that. I mean, it's a whole new generation where my 12-year-old is with one little finger can type faster than I could with all my fingers. You know, it's just a whole different way of interacting with education. Kids don't bring books home anymore. They all have iPads, and they're hooking up the iPads now to our smart TVs, and they're interacting with each other. And it's just amazing to see the technology. We're kind of saying, dang, we never had that when we were kids. And at the same time, it's fun, but it's educational. Is there that kind of component where we're using those so-called touch screens and LED screens and stuff like that? Because I really see that the future, it's not really going to be those printed books, but it's going to be more technology, and how do we blend that in? And I think we're doing a great job, but how do we look 10 to 20 years in the future and kind of be ahead of the curve and kind of be those innovators when it comes to libraries? And I'm not trying to say we're not, but I think we have an opportunity, especially when we're talking about children's area, to really think way out of the box and something that other libraries don't even have.
Madam Chair, Councilman Nowakowski, thanks for the question. That's a very good point. And I think this plan takes us down that road because it's a mix of interactives as well as the technology that is a continuum of learning. So the very, very young child learns through manipulating and learning letters, et cetera, and then they move into the technology. So we're trying to be very much on the cutting edge here and incorporate the latest technologies as well as activities and ideas that we have seen other libraries use very well and stay on top of the trend. So we think we're perfectly poised for taking this library into the future. And as Will mentioned, we're always rearranging and updating what's going on in that building and in all of our libraries to stay on top of the latest trends.
And I was wondering if you had any educators or teachers, because when I walk into a classroom with these smart boards and people are writing and it's printed out within minutes, and individuals that are using a tablet and they're doing their test all together, and the teacher knows immediately how many individuals passed and not passed and which person answered the question the right way, the wrong way. I'm just wondering if we're interfacing with the educational systems that are out there and that it's complementing what the kids are learning in their schools and within our libraries too.
Councilman, absolutely. We do interface continually with teachers, and they really appreciate the cooperation. We supply resources to them, and they, in turn, appreciate that we have all those resources. We do work together very, very closely. We're actually doing a grant project right now with Washington School District, giving them STEM kits and working with the kids in the library to support STEM skills. So,
All right, thank you.
let me introduce now Kelly Bouchong, our Executive Director for the Phoenix Public Library, and she can tell you a little bit about the capital campaign we're going to undertake to raise the funds.
Okay, thank you. So as the Executive Director of the Phoenix Public Library Foundation, the Foundation's Board of Directors is very excited about this project and enthusiastic about the upcoming capital project. We will be coming up on the library's 25th anniversary right around the corner, and the foundation feels that this is a great opportunity on which to build a major fundraising campaign like this one. And we have selected a capital campaign consulting firm, and the first step will be conducting a feasibility and market positioning study. So through this study, we will build the strategies and resources to optimize our fundraising, and we'll be identifying potential donors, campaign leaders, the campaign concepts, and a case for support. And a major part of the process will be interviewing all the key stakeholders in this project. And we're very thankful to Will for all the time that he put into the design, and basically very excited to get going.
Well, thank you. This is really exciting to modernize our space in the children's area. One of the pieces that I always, every time I go to the children's area, is the computer lab or the computer area. And it's always full. And there's always kids waiting in the wing to use the computer area. So are we going to expand that area?
Councilwoman, yes, we will be doing that.
Okay.
And we'll probably be incorporating tablets that can be checked out, so it won't necessarily be fixed computers, but we'll have both. So,
That would make sense. So there's where we're modernizing ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like the little iPad. I actually, it's not even laptops. It's really the minis now that operate that at that level. And it's amazing how that little mini operates like a computer. The difference is then you have to figure all the nuances of printing and everything else. But that's great because my kids received minis this Christmas and was begging for some minis, and we needed to update our other iPad, and so it's amazing to watch them do all their homework on there. And sometimes I'm thinking, okay, the eyes, we need to be cognizant of the eyes. We don't know what this is going to do to their eyes for the future, but it is what it is. So thank you so much. Thank you, Will. I know you're dedicated to the city of Phoenix and to Margaret Hance Park area and the library, so I really appreciate your service. And thank you for going out there and hustling for that money, because we're going to need it. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your support.
Item number 8. Ms. Jovanovich.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the council, the Human Services Department staff is recommending to withdraw this item. We do have all of our delegate agencies that have submitted balanced budgets, and so the department will be coming forward in February with a refunding application for your review and approval. I do know that there are people here today to speak on that item, so I do want to clarify for the people in the audience as well as the subcommittee that we are not making any changes to the slots at the Wilson Head Start Delegate Agency because they did come in with a balanced budget.
Okay, so I'm excited that we don't have to hear this item because everybody came in with a balanced budget. And the other piece is, and I'm just gonna, I don't know if you guys can tell me if it's okay to speak about it, but I just wanted to speak about the point of why we got here today.
Madam Chair, we would then actually be doing the presentation.
All right.
Because again, we do require that each of the delegates come in with a balanced budget. Originally, that was not the case, and so we were coming forward prepared to talk about some options. But since they have come in with a balanced budget, we're able to move forward and come forward next month with a refunding application.
Okay. My question is, do I move this to call to the public because we're not listening to this item? Or how would you like me to move this?
You can take the cards
Okay.
on the item.
All right. So, Hope Edwards. This is specifically, how are they going to speak about item 8 if we're not hearing it? Okay.
And Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, however, you do need to make a motion to withdraw the item.
Okay. All right.
So if we could,
I'll make a motion to withdraw item number 8.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Councilman Valenzuela,
Yes.
are you on the phone?
Oh, yes, I'm here.
Yeah,
All right, I
that's
have everybody here.
Councilwoman. Yeah, right.
Okay, thank you. All right, all the motion passed.
Yes.
Hope Edwards, please. You have
Good
2 minutes.
morning. Good morning to the members of the council, and thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to speak in lieu of the change in occurrences. I wanted to still speak with you. My name is Hope Edwards. I'm the director for the Wilson Head Start program. We did submit an unbalanced budget in November. I informed the city that the budget was not balanced. We're a very small school district, and it is hard for us to operate on $5,000 per child, but we do our very best every day for children and families to maintain quality services. The most troubling and unsettling thing to me was that we found out that this recommendation to possibly not fund Wilson Head Start, we found this out by myself going online and pulling the agenda for this meeting. This was not conveyed to us by anyone from the city that we would be on the item today with recommendation for that. So that was troubling. I come from the city of Phoenix. I worked for the city of Phoenix from '96 to 2000. When I took on the job as Head Start director, it was my goal to work very transparent with the city of Phoenix, because working with the city of Phoenix, I knew that in order to have a successful program that I needed to work closely with the city and not think about them and us, but together we can provide the best possible services. And that's what I've strived to do for the past 16 years. What I just want to be known today is that there are still children and families in our Wilson community. As you can see, a great number of them came out today. I know sometimes it looks like, looking at the census information, community needs assessment, that there's not a need in that area for that program, but I can assure you there are. There are parents here today that want to speak to that fact, and they've brought little ones to show you that those little ones will turn 3 next year. So I'd just like to ask the council on the bottom of my heart, because this subject may come up again, please consider that there are still children and families in that community who deserve to have this valuable program. Thank you so very much for your time.
Marvin, I hope I'm saying this, Lovato? Oh, Marvin.
Good morning. Marvin
Morning.
Lobato. I'm superintendent for Fowler Elementary School District, which we are glad to have Councilman Nowakowski as our council person. I just wanted to give you an update on our school district and Head Start when I saw the agenda item. And so we are fortunate that we have 196 children. And of the 196, we have 8 classrooms. We have 4 classrooms where they are going full day, because that's the movement now. We also have 3 classrooms where are half days. And then we also have 1 classroom of half-day 3-year-olds. One of the 4-year-old programs we have combined with our preschool development grant, because we had to try to figure out how best to serve our children. So with that being said, we do have 1 classroom where it's a combined program. Due to the per pupil allocation for our district, it has benefited us, basically because we've been able to add more classroom supplies and materials, more training for teachers. We have been able to do more field trips, and now we can actually feed our teachers, which is part of the program, as opposed to the district having to pick up that cost. So with that being said, I just want you to know that Fowler School District Head Start program is running well, as I know our Wilson counterparts are doing the same. But I also just want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to just give you an update. Thank you.
I have a question, just because we're supposed to be good stewards with the federal grants that come through for the Head Start program. And one of the things that we try to do is we try to make sure that there's a zero budget at the end of the day, because basically the city of Phoenix is sort of like a pass-through for those grants. And it just concerns me that I heard that the city wasn't in contact with you all when it comes to the budget. Have you had any problems in the past with city staff asking you or requesting from you a budget?
I just know that our finance director and our Head Start director and early childhood director work real closely with Marion. He was in the audience. I don't know if he stepped out for a minute. But they work very closely, so they know they have to give me a report monthly. And so they have to make sure that when I present that to the governing board, that we have our funds coming in and that we are balanced.
Alrighty, thank you.
Mario Martinez, you have 2 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning. What I was going to talk about, I had to change it up. So I'll make this brief very quickly. We've had 2 misinformations coming back from the city given to Hope and to our superintendent, Mr. Sanchez. One, we were told Thursday, that the budget will be cut for $30,000 from Wilson Elementary School District. Monday, it was reported back to me from both Mr. Sanchez and Ms. Edwards that the Head Start was going to be eliminated. We had an emergency board meeting, school board meeting, yesterday afternoon to discuss this, to write letters. Now it's coming back to us that it's only $30,000 that's going to be cut. I want to say $30,000, but I'll quickly mention that also. What's troubling is the misinformation that is coming from the city that is being given to Ms. Edwards and Mr. Sanchez. It has not been clear at all. Second, as Ms. Edwards said, we are still in an impoverished area. Our Head Start has served kids. Last year, we had seats taken away from us, given to a different part of the city, Deer Valley, and that was going to hurt our students in the long run. That means that last year, we might have not had as many kids as we usually have, but that 1 year does not count all the other years, the 30 years that we've had at Wilson. So if that can be taken into consideration come February, not to cut the $30,000 out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'm assuming you're a school board member?
Yes, I am.
Thank
School
you.
board member, and I'm also the president of the Sky Harbor Association.
Okay. Antonio Sanchez.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you for allowing me to speak. What's troubling to me is that we did not receive information regarding the closure of the Wilson Head Start program. We just, as Hope said, we just received notice of it on Monday. And I'll just to give you a little bit about the history. In 2014, April of 2014, Fowler School District, Murphy, and Wilson were here presenting to a subcommittee regarding a very similar situation. And one of the things that came up out of that process is that there would be better communication. One of the things that came up is that if there was going to be a drastic change to a Head Start program, the superintendent of that district would be informed. I was never informed about the closure of this district, of the Head Start program in our district. I would think that the elimination of a program is a drastic change. Mo was here at that time. We haven't followed that process of communication. I've been trying to reach them since November 16th. I've been trying to get a meeting together. I have emails. I didn't bring anything with me because I knew the item had been taken off. But I have emails where I've emailed them, trying to meet with them, sit down with them to go over this, to go over the situation. I have yet to hear from them. I left them. I even opened up my calendar a whole week, told them I'm open any day this week. Nothing. Haven't heard from them regarding this situation. So I hope that in the future there's better communication. I don't think it had to come to this point. We're willing to work with them and do everything we can to keep our program. Thank you.
Thank you. Reina Hernandez.
Hi, good morning. My name is Reina.
Morning.
I am a mother of 5 children, which only 3 of them have attended Head Start due to the fact that we were out of district. I have one 3-year-old coming to the Head Start who I was getting ready to enroll. And even though a Head Start has made a big impact in all my kids' life, I have one child who has problem with speech, which as soon as I enroll him to Head Start, they start helping him. They put him in IEP classes, and he is now in kindergarten, and he's at grade level. I'm also a parent. I'm a classroom president. I am a policy committee president as well, and I attend policy committee councils. If Head Start's no longer funded, it will affect not only my son, who is ready to turn 3 years, but it will affect people in our community. I would like to ask to please let families from apartment complex across the Liberty Theater to be able to attend our Wilson Head Start. I know that it has been asked before, but not much has been done. We have empty classes with materials not being used. If boundaries were open to these families, it would be a good chance the classes will benefit more children in our community. I am begging to please keep funding our Wilson Head Start. Please don't leave our community without such an amazing program. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hernandez, and congratulations to your children and them striving. And that's starting with Head Start and moving forward. That's the very beginning to know that they will be successful in life. So thank you for your being part of the community and raising your 5 kids. You're welcome. What I do have to say is that I have been deeply involved in this process and deeply concerned. This process actually happened and started 2014, and there was a process that we all voted on to equalize all our Head Starts. And what I mean by equalizing all our Head Starts is making sure that every program received the same amount of funding. Certain programs were seeing higher amount of funding per pupil, some were receiving lower. So we decided to, as a group, equalize that funding. And during that time, we understood that some of the groups were going to need time as we phased out to the equalization. And we have taken 3 years to do that. And it's taken 3 years, and we have now hit the 3rd year to equalize our budget and also to be able to be coming on budget and on task. So I know there were many calls, many meet and greets or visits throughout this whole process and this whole time. It's unfortunate to hear that possibly one of our feeder schools, Wilson, was not in that loop. I have the timeline, and I'm more than willing to meet with you very privately about this matter, because I don't think we should throw it out in the public. And I'm asking for all emails and all documentation of communication with Wilson. The other piece is that I know Councilwoman Gallego was deeply involved in this, and her and I were speaking about this piece. And I do know that her chief of staff, Joaquin Rios, did reach out to Wilson and did not receive a return call. So there is communication happening. There's a disconnect on how it's happening. So we will settle this. I am very proud that we are on budget, that all our Head Starts are on budget, and that we're doing a quality job. I do have to say, in addition to that, is that I went to Washington, D.C., met with the Head Start deputy to talk about all the changes that are happening. There are changes that are happening in Head Start. They are looking at quality programs, and they are looking at, I asked the question, but what does quality look like? Is that going to cost more to the program? They said yes. I said, well, then that means less students. They said yes, because we would like a more quality program and really target those students that we really need to move ahead. So there are changes happening. It's not happening from the city, it's happening from the federal government, and we are abiding to the law and the rules. So I just want to let parents know there are changes coming and have been coming. So thank you for your concern. I really appreciate it. I am now moving to item 9.
You know, let me just have a comment.
Go ahead.
You know, I'm a product of Head Start. I went to Head Start, I can't tell you how many years ago, but it's very important, and that's why I like to sit on this committee, because I believe in Head Start. But one of the things back in 2014, some of the Head Start programs came to us and were saying, why are some individuals getting more money than others? And then we started looking at it, and per kid, there was some areas that were getting more per kid than others. So we said we need to make sure that everybody's equal. So that's where that equalization came on. And all of my colleagues agreed to that, because we believe that a kid from the East Valley, from the West Valley, from the South or the North, they're all equal. And that we should basically make sure each kid gets the same amount of funding, no matter where you live, no matter what area you live in, if it's poor or not, but everybody should be treated the same. So saying that, there was some programs that had to make some cuts because they were basically budgeting a little higher than the rest of the people. So now it's that time where that zero budget's coming in, that everybody has the same amount. We gave them a couple years to kind of balance their budget, and now's the hard time. Now is the time where everybody's being treated the same, and we have to come up with the budget. We're responsible to the federal government to report every single dollar that comes through the city to the different agencies that are out there providing the services of Head Start. And I think that's where some of the confusion's happening, is that we've seen some seats that weren't available. And if we're getting money from the federal government to fill those seats, we want to make sure that we maximize every single dollar. So for some reason, if your school wasn't able to fill 1 or 100 seats, then we need to make sure that other parts of the city benefits from that funding, and that we don't lose the opportunity to maximize that. So that's what all this was all about. So I just want to make sure with the parents that we believe that you all have a great program. We support your program 100%, but we want to make sure that everybody's being treated equally. And I'm pretty sure with the timeline that I'm looking at, there was lines of communication going on from our Head Start staff to your staff, from council member staff also. So there's some type of miscommunication, and we're just going to have to figure out how to fix that. I know that Councilmember Gallegos and Councilmember Pastor are working on that and making sure that there's lines of communication. So once again, I apologize, because I can feel the pain that you get a notice or a phone call that the Head Start program is going to end, and that's scary, because I know how important Head Start is, especially for working families. So once again, the city of Phoenix is trying to maximize every single dollar out there, and we're not cutting programs. We're just trying to make sure that we touch every kid that we can. Thank you.
So you're absolutely correct. Programs are not being cut. So let me just get that clear. Programs are not being cut. Seats are not being taken away. There's no reallocation. This item was about coming on, being on budget and making your budget. Everybody's there, so that's a great success. Okay, expanding Read On Phoenix.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. We're here today to provide a really quick update of the city's efforts regarding education, in particular, Read On Phoenix. The initiative has been in existence for the last 2 to 3 years. Joining me at the table, I have Rita Hamilton, the city librarian, Yvonne Pastor, who's a rec coordinator with the after-school program, and Mo Gallegos with the Human Services Department. As you are aware, the Youth and Education Office leads several or numerous internal and external initiatives when it comes to the Cradle to Career pipeline. One of our roles is grade level reading. and that is Read on Phoenix. So today I want to start off with a couple of statistics regarding the city of Phoenix. According to the U.S. Department of Education National Center for Educational Statistics, the percentage of students reading at grade level, at or above grade level, is 30% in 2015. These are what we call NAEP scores, which is up 28% from 2013 when Read on Phoenix began. Currently, of the 25 school districts serving elementary students in Phoenix, only 6 have 50% or more of their third grade population reading proficiently, based on the 2016 the 2016 AZ Merit test. And according to the Department of Ed, approximately 33% of Phoenix are reading at third grade level. And this is data that has been disaggregated, and this only includes City of Phoenix schools, which is up from 32% in 2015. So our trajectory is going up, not as much as we would like. As you know, by the end of third grade, students should be reading at grade level, or the statistics show that the increase of them not being successful in the future dramatically increases. As you're aware, the Youth in Education launch Phoenix Achieves to promote city programs along the educational pipeline. We really focus on school readiness, grade level reading, math proficiency, high school completion, and college and career readiness. Read on Phoenix supports Phoenix Achieves as well as MBK efforts to ensure that all students have access to quality literacy programs that prepare students and families for success. In 2013, in response to Move On in Reading, that's when Read on Phoenix began. One of the things I would like to say, based on the work of everybody at this table, as well as another major partner who is in the audience that I failed to mention, was Leanne Lindsay from United Way, who heads up Thriving Together. We actually received a 2016 Pacesetters Award from the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. This was a huge award. Not many cities across the country are recognized with this particular success. So over the past couple of years, we've had a lot of successes when it comes to programming. The library has instituted kindergarten boot camp, different series of workshops like Brain Time and Ready, Set, Kindergarten, music and movement. Again, I know Rita's at the table, but I would love to recognize Wendy Resnick, who really heads up that as well. So Wendy does a great job and is part of my executive team for Read on Phoenix, as well as a lot of work being done in Head Start. We've increased quality in our sites. I know that was a topic today, but a lot of additional funding has come in when it comes to the Child Partnership Act. And we did receive funding to increase quality in child care facilities. Other program successes have been really increasing literacy activities and tutoring in PAC after school. Yvonne in the Parks Department has worked really hard in infusing math as well as literacy activities when it comes to tutoring to increase proficiencies. With summer learning loss, the library department has participated in a huge summer program. We worked really hard, at least Wendy worked really hard, and developed a pre and post test to really gauge the work that is being done in the summer reading program. And last but not least is under our volunteerism pillar, we launched our tutoring program, the ARP Experience Corps program, which was launched in 2013. We had a new strategic plan in 2016. Our goal is to close the learning gap among economically disadvantaged youth by 8% on 2020. You may think that that's not a lot, but it takes a lot of work to increase reading proficiencies. Our areas of focus now are school readiness, out-of-school time literacy, and family engagement. So those are the areas we'll be focusing in 16 through 18. The one thing with Read on Phoenix, we're making some recommendation to subcommittee today, and that is to seek recommendation for the Phoenix Great Start program under Read on Phoenix. The Great Start program provides Phoenix children in Title I schools free admission to several educational and cultural centers. This was launched in 2013, and we want to expand it throughout the city of Phoenix. We're also seeking to expand Experience Corps Phoenix in our school districts. So we're looking to bringing on additional school districts to place volunteers in the program. And then last but not least, the Parks Department is working closely with United Way and Thriving Together under our out-of-school time literacy pillar, and they want to include PlayWorks to help develop structured play activities to also increase educational outcomes as well as different other outcomes that they target. So right now, staff is requesting subcommittee to recommend the expansion of Read On Phoenix. That includes Phoenix Great Start, ARP Experience Corps, as well as the PAC After School Literacy Enrichment Programs.
So I have personally seen this impact on students, especially when I've gone out to read and spoken to the volunteers or those that are participating on Read On Phoenix, and then looking at the data and demonstrating how the data is now showing us that how this impact starts from a very beginning of the school year and where they land at the end of the school year. One of my questions in expansion is, do we work with the schools in the sense of identifying those second graders that are border that need the assistance, so that when they hit third grade, they're already partnered with their volunteer and they're hitting the first day?
Yes, so actually the tutoring program targets first, second, and third graders. We allow the principals to decide what students to target. Typically, we target what we call tier 2 students, which are those bubble students who need that extra help to get to tier 1, which is reading at grade level.
Perfect. And that's why it's so successful. Any comments?
Just a comment. I know that University Park has changed 180 degrees. And Yvonne, I know that the after-school programs is just amazing. A lot of those students have parents that have 2 jobs, and sometimes they have no one to go home to. And it's our centers that are a place where they feel safe and they can actually get help with their homework. And the PAC program has just been incredible. So I just want to thank you all for that. The hard work and everything you do out there in the community to really change lives and change young people and encourage them for higher education, because I really believe that that's the way we're going to end poverty and domestic violence and gang violence, is giving those young people an education and helping them along the way. So thank you all.
So thank you for all your great work. I need a motion to recommend for expanding Read On.
I make a motion to expand Read On and approve staff's recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Item 10, Golf Management System.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Today we're here to take forward a request for proposal to issue the golf management system. And I have Tim Merritt here, who is the Deputy Director over the Golf Division. And so I'll let him take the presentation away.
Okay, good morning, Chairwoman Pastor, members of the subcommittee. Today's staff is here to request the authority to enter into a contract with Golf Complete, doing business as 4UP, to provide golf management software as well as website development and supporting services to the city's 5 golf courses. Our contract with our current system has been in place since 2008, and the contract expires in 2017. An RFP process was conducted and 2 proposals were received for a golf management software platform and supporting services. A panel consisting of course head professionals, a PGA Director of Golf, and IT representative recommended Golf Complete as the awarded vendor. This system will enhance the services for our customers and help our managers efficiently manage our business. The system acts as a cash register to track sales of merchandise, golf fees, and inventory, as well as provide an online tee sheet for reserving and tracking golf times, tee times. Additionally, the system will provide management tools for all of our golf courses, the Phoenix Golf Card, email marketing campaigns, and provide information on the utilization of the Phoenix golf courses. The system has the capability to expand and be used in conjunction with the Phoenix City Services Card. The system will be seamlessly transitioned and communicated to our customer base by email campaigns and signage at each golf course starting this spring prior to the new system going live in May. The benefits of the new golf management software system versus our current system allow staff to offer an even better customer service experience to our clientele by utilizing upgraded technology for more efficient internet booking experience with new websites, provide better tools email marketing, text marketing, and to increase earning potential and enhance marketing power. It's cheaper to operate, which provides cost savings to the city, and is more efficient by providing better operational information and takes less time to administer. Operating costs will be paid for by transaction fees generated by Golf Tee Times, which means there will be no general fund expenditures associated with operating this system. If you have no other questions, we request the subcommittee. I'm sorry. If you have no other questions, we request the subcommittee recommendation to allow staff to enter into a contract with Golf Complete for 3-year contract term, options to extend to the contract annually thereafter for 2 additional years.
I believe Councilman Nowakowski has a question.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Basically, is there an installation fee to install the system into our golf courses?
The only fees that will incur will be basically a $300 licensing fee per our facility.
Now, is there some type of number of bookings per month or per year that we have to keep with to actually have the system, or is there a requirement of bookings? And
Basically, they get 2 tee times per day, and they get to do whatever they want with them. They basically sell them.
Councilman Nowakowski, members of the subcommittee, if we only sold 1 tee time a day, they still have to process everything. So there's no minimum
All right,
for us.
perfect.
That's correct.
And then the last question, just a request, and it's a silly request, but I'd like to name the system after Councilmember Waring, that he loves golf courses. So if we can call it the Waring Golf Management System, that'd be great.
He's not here to defend himself right now. If that's a possibility, let us know.
Well, the Parks Board has naming rights on things, so we'll
Okay.
check with them.
All right, thank you. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Opposed? I'm opposed.
What?
This is the CTO.
Huh? You're opposed to it?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
3-1. We are now at call to the public. I don't have any more cards to call to the public. Future agenda items, update on the Rangers, anything else?
You know, also can we get a history of how this sales of parkland came about? I think Mrs. Rogers has a good point, but I'd like to basically have some knowledge of how did we come up with this new policy, what triggered it, and if there is a possibility of modifying it somehow, some way.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.